Welcome to Regions Recover Together. I'm so grateful that so many hundreds of you are here with us virtually today. This online event builds on the work of the Regions Rise Together initiative, which was launched last year by the Newsom administration, led by its Office of Planning and Research, its Office of Business and Economic Development, and its Strategic Growth Council. It is expanded to include legislative champions, such as Assemblymember Rudy Salas, who's the author of the Regions Rise Grant Program Bill, AB 3205, that just passed out of the Assembly with unanimous bipartisan support. And it has been powered by so many of you here today doing regionally rooted work throughout the state. You'll be hearing from many key officials from the Newsom administration about how they are carrying this work forward, including through the activities of the statewide Economic Recovery Task Force. This event is intended to complement that work and to put a strong focus on the innovative actions that are happening in the diverse and distinct regions of this great state. Many of the leaders you will hear from today, and so many of you attending, are running local and regional recovery efforts. So thank you for this essential and I know exhausting work. Before we move on, I wanted to put a strong and clear focus on the nexus between geographic equity and racial equity. California is a very diverse state, so bringing attention to places like the Central Valley and the Inland Empire is also bringing attention to the diverse and growing populations who live there. Addressing structural discrimination, whether it happens along racial or geographic or gender or any other lines, is a cause that we have been and will remain committed to at California Forward. And we will be measuring directly the progress we are making as a state on addressing racial and geographic inequity through the California Dream Index that we will be launching at this year's California Economic Summit on December 3rd and 4th. I hope to see you all there. So to get things going, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Oscar Chavez, who's the co-chair of the California Stewardship Network. California Forward serves as the backbone for this growing network of regional leaders committed to inclusive and sustainable growth, or what is sometimes called the triple bottom line: the environment, the economy, and equity. Regions Rise Together and this ongoing work is the culmination of over a decade of activity by these leaders working to knit these priorities together in a way that this event does today. Oscar.
Great, thank you so much, Micah. And it's such a pleasure to be here, albeit virtually, but it's so good to see over 390 participants join us today to address some of our state's most pressing and complex issues. And I think this is the right group to do it. I'm so proud to be part of the California Stewardship Network, which is a growing network of organizations across the state working to advance triple bottom line solutions to these very persistent and complex issues, and also to advance this idea of steward leadership. You know, it is going to require a new way of behaving, of leading, given the complexity of our issues today, that we really need to grow this network and this movement of steward leaders across our state. I'm so proud of the fact that the California Stewardship Network is really building a cross-sector group of organizations, sort of the necessary, unusual partners that the state really needs to address issues from, addressing issues around the environment, the economy, and now our huge focus on racial disparities and equities to ensure that we can advance solutions and strategies that truly lift up, people across the state, especially those that today are struggling. So I'm so proud to be part of this group, and I want to welcome all of you. And then now I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, my co-chair, who will talk a little bit about why it's so important and why we believe that regions working together is the solution to advance our work moving forward. Bruce?
Thank you, Oscar. It's good to hear your voice and see you all. Couldn't be more thrilled to partner with Oscar in this. And Micah, if you need me to click anything anywhere, just let me know and I'll take care of that. So hang on a moment, there we go. It seems like an eternity since we were last in Fresno, and so much has happened since we were last in Fresno just several months ago, or I guess it's a half a year ago now. And there I am standing at the beach, because that's where we all ought to be, looking at the glorious, given that we can do this all virtually. So much has changed since we were in Fresno, and what we had an opportunity to do and learn in Fresno was the input and professionalism, the craft and strategies in all of the regions shared so beautifully, so soulfully on this triple bottom line agenda that we are passionate about and being stewards about. Never, though, any of us wanting to be the folks who miss out on taking advantage of chaos and crisis. We have an extraordinary opportunity before us. And I've heard this phrase often, and I will repeat it and go to the well again. It's not what it should be for all of us or any of us. It's not about going back and recovering the California, the regions and the communities we had, but about an extraordinary opportunity to create the ones that we want. We had extraordinary communities and we will always have them, but to double down on opportunities to create environmental balance, contribute further to social justice, and assure a broadly shared prosperity is the agenda that's before us today. So I know others will talk more about the specific agenda, but we have all of these incredible panels organized. We have input from all. What's fundamental to the core and purpose of the Stewardship Network and of California Forward is the opportunity to share and learn from each other effectively and put into practice in our regions the expert work that might be transferable from one area to another. We're all unique. We all have so much commonly shared, and we have an opportunity to learn from each other today. I'm excited to be part of this group. I'm thrilled to get to the next step of this and witness the good work that's done in each of these workshops. Micah, I will kick it back to you.
Okay. Next slide, please, David. Okay, so quickly, our agenda for today, we're going to be doing a really rapid fire plenary in which we're going through the triple bottom line, focusing on an equitable regions up recovery, a sustainable regions up recovery, and a rapid regions up recovery. And then we'll be pulling it all together with the assistance of some of the members of our Youth Advisory Council and Kate Gordon, who's the co-chair of Regions Rise Together for the Newsom administration. And then we're going to be breaking out into workshops. Many of you pre-registered for those workshops, but at the end of the plenary, we'll also explain how to register or how to just jump right into one if you haven't already, or to switch if you now decide that you want to participate in another one. So without one more slide, David. Couple of housekeeping notes. I think we all more or less know the drill at this point, but the event today is being recorded. Speakers, please mute yourself and turn off your videos when you are not speaking. And then attendees, please submit, please keep the fun chatting going in terms of where you're coming in from. But if you want to ask a question of the speakers, please put it in the Q&A, and my colleagues are going to be collating those so that we can ask them. Technical issues can be sent in the chat or to the host. And again, we'll be breaking out after about an hour and a half. So let's move into our first panel. We are absolutely thrilled to have three wonderful leaders with us, putting equity first in the event today. Lande Ajosi is the Senior Advisor for Higher Education and so many other things in the Governor's Office. Taraline Gray runs the Fresno Black Metro Chamber of Commerce and is a leader of the Fresno Drive Initiative. And Cesar Lara is Executive Director of the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council and is part of the burgeoning Salinas Inclusive Economy effort that we are doing in the run-up to the Economic Summit this year. Lande, can you kick us off in just a few minutes? What do we need to do to ensure an equitable Regions Up economic recovery?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. As Bruce said, it feels like just a minute ago, and then also several years ago that we were all together in Fresno. When I think about an equitable recovery, it's hard to think about given the context of what we are facing currently. I don't think we've ever seen a crisis quite as unparalleled as the one that we find ourselves in now, where we're in a health crisis, an economic crisis, a crisis of equity and social justice. And that kind of triple whammy, if you will, really sets up a whole set of activities that need to happen if we really want to recover equitably. I think the first thing is, I would say that we have to think about some principles that actually the governor's task force on jobs and the economy has been thinking through in terms of what does equity really mean. Some of that recovery means thinking about putting people first. That means that in addition to looking through and thinking about how do we get our businesses back online, that we really have to be thinking about who are those essential workers, who are those frontline workers, who are the displaced workers, and how do we get those people who are most vulnerable in this moment to recover first, because they are the people who have in large part been disproportionately impacted by the triple crises that we're enduring. I think the other thing that we need to do if we really want to have an equitable recovery is that we can't be afraid to name race and ethnicity as a significant and central part of that recovery. It means that we need to look at eliminating the impacts of past and current discrimination, and that we need to look at what does it mean for different people of color to emerge from this crisis, not just where they were, but better off, because where they were wasn't equitable to begin with. It means really taking on issues related to poverty and inequality and taking that on in a very explicit way. We need to think about the fact that one's zip code should not determine whether or not you are healthy or whether or not you are economically secure, but that in fact, that is determined by what the effort that you put in, the energy that you put into the work and the community around you. And so we need to really be explicit about opportunity as being place-based and not dictated by poverty, by housing, by economic circumstance. And then finally, we need to prioritize shared priorities and shared prosperity. So how do we think about really all of those pieces together, leading to a California for all, where everyone is better off because the most vulnerable amongst us are better off? How do we think about expanding ladders of opportunity so that California becomes stronger, becomes more vibrant, becomes more prosperous, and certainly becomes a more resilient state? So I think that all of those things really contribute to thinking about equity, and those are all principles that the governor's task force is really guided by as we think about equity, and that we apply that equity lens not just to the economic recovery, we apply it to thinking about how we advance our climate goals. We're applying it to thinking about how do we advance financial systems that need to serve everyone well. We apply it in every manner to really think about who needs to be advanced and how do we get everyone there by making sure the most vulnerable Californians are taken care of.
Great. Thank you so much, Lande. Really appreciate your being with us today and all the work that you're doing to help run the governor's statewide economic recovery task force. So turning to Tara Lynn Gray from Fresno, one of our Economic Summit host committee folks from last year. Tara?
Hi there, Micah. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. As Chief Executive Officer of the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce and Chamber Foundation, we engage, educate, and empower Black-owned businesses. We do technical assistance, capacity building, and advocacy services. And we see firsthand every day the effect of inequities and disenfranchisement for Black business owners, individuals, and their families. And that makes us hope for and work towards a free market without political, economic, or social barriers to the financial success of our constituency. We have been working the last year on Fresno Drive, which folks heard quite a bit about at the summit in November. And we have focused keenly on the Urban Institute's 2018 research on economic mobility in California's largest cities, revealed that Fresno was 59 out of 59 for economic and racial disparity. In addition, our regional economy does not perform strongly enough to create the volume of higher paying job opportunities needed to break the cycle of chronic poverty and economic distress that has plagued our region. So in thinking about what we need to do to ensure an equitable regions up recovery, I think that we have to acknowledge these findings, and then we also have to acknowledge some basic truths to help develop policy and systems that make it possible for people to help themselves. This means that we've got to create more equitable initiatives like our Drive initiative, but we also have to speak to some truths. And the first truth is that Black lives are not valued as the lives of other people are. Blacks are at the bottom of every social structure and treated with bias and supposition in almost every aspect of daily life. It plays out in social constructs, it plays out in business, it plays out in the market, and it affects our very psyche and everything that we bring to the table. And I want to see, as we start to look at recovery, that we stop our tendency to create phrases and euphemisms to cover up the ugliness of racism. Whether it's diversity and inclusion, equality, disadvantaged communities, the core problem is a problem of race, and how race has been used to justify our founding systems of capitalism, oppression, disenfranchisement, all of those things that we are seeing the people of this country say no more. These systems were dependent on a class of people that were once owned by other people, and it has created a culture for 400 years that was pretty ugly. Yesterday it was slavery, today it's mass incarceration, justifiable homicide, high jobless rates, all the end result, a class system that values one set of lives and not the other. And so what I hope that we focus on is the hard work of healing that. And as my guest just spoke about all of the systems that we need to look at, whether it's the green economy, how we create jobs, high-paying jobs. We need to put ourselves in a position where we value all of our people, create a California for all. I think the second thing, the second truth is that Blacks, as a result of the aforementioned, did not get their fair share of the American pie. And we have to find a way to respect Black people, to hire Black people, pay Black people the same that you pay others, period. And then finally, we all must act. You know, we come together in settings like this one and we think through the issues, we highlight the problems, we ponder the solutions. But the simple truth is that we must all act. We must leave these events with the determination to do something and create something different. We have to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. We have to get comfortable with the idea that what's good for the guy at the bottom is good for us all. We have to be okay with allowing Black folks to be pro-Black, and that means that it's not necessarily anti-white. We have to recognize that we are all one body, and that what we do individually affects us all collectively. And I think that's what we are seeing playing out in the streets of America today, is a recognition that no vote is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo is no longer okay for America.
Thank you, Tara. Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate your kicking us off with that call to action, because that's what the California Economic Summit is all about. You know, that's why we put you to work in Fresno and these other places.
Yes.
Cesar, bring us home, man.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be in here and have this critical discussion kind of as we're in the crossroad, and what we really need to have a conversation about, and the previous speaker, you know, spoke to it, is there's a lot of truths that need to be addressed. And we need to invest in a healthier future. And really the notion is around a recovery for all. And what we need to confront is the COVID crisis. We need to confront the COVID crisis head on and build an equitable recovery. California must invest in people, services, and infrastructure to get our state back to work. California is at a crossroad. We can seize this opportunity to restructure our economy. COVID-19 is the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression, with millions of workers out of work, with tax revenue falling. And let's be honest, with Black and brown communities are dying and losing jobs more than others. The public is fearing what the future holds. California is at a crossroads. To recover, we must extend and not shrink our government. We need to invest in everyday workers and restructure our economy to begin to heal the great gaps of income inequality and the racism that has woven into our economic system. And the biggest question that we need to ask ourselves is we must not make the same mistakes of the old economy for the new normal. We have this great opportunity, you know, sadly enough, with many deaths and many marches, because the issue of, you know, race inequality did not come about a couple of weeks ago in Minneapolis. It's been before us for a long time, and you know, the issues around incarceration, the issues around income inequality are true and need to be addressed in this new economy. And past recoveries like the one we've had in 2008, just recently, relied on kind of the old notions of trickle-down economics, politics that invest in corporations, shareholders, and the wealthy, while engaging measures that rely on layoffs, cuts to public services for middle and working class folks. However, that this model has worsened the economic crisis and income inequality, forces our people, has forced our people into unemployment, and cuts in essential services like healthcare, childcare, family services, and public safety. And really what we really need to talk about, and I kind of look forward to discussion, is a 2020 version of a Great New Deal, that we must invest in people, services, and infrastructure. Let me repeat: people, services, and infrastructure. When people work, we spend money in local business, our economy expands, and we generate tax revenue for vital services that we all hold. And this is about a really bubble up economy, and where we put California on a fast and more equitable path to recovery. Corporations must pay their fair share, and we need to prioritize workers, not shareholders. And beyond COVID, before COVID, we experienced an economic boom with the largest bull market in history. However, what we saw was middle class and working families did not see any of these benefits. Shareholders profited, and our local governments gave corporations incentives, subsidies, and now, the result is that we don't have these deep surpluses like we needed. We're not really for this rainy day that we're facing today, and that would have helped us kind of recover from the current crisis. To recover and build an equitable future, corporations must pay their fair share. We must include we must increase corporate taxes, change the federal tax code to capital gains at the same rate as workers' income, and pass measures like schools and communities first I think all voters in California will have an opportunity in November to really look at, the magic Prop 13 and to restore 12 billion annually by closing the commercial loophole. And it's time for our corporate neighbors to pay their fair share for education, housing, and provide health care for their workers, building the road and highways that we use, and ensuring safety for our future. And, in the labor movement, as part of the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council, we've been working really hard to kind of look at what does a recovery look like. I, really want to thank California Forward for inviting us late last year and early, this year post the Fresno conference, and that partnership has allowed us to really continue our discussion around these critical issues about how do we look at the new normal. I think that COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to really relook at our economy, and what can we do to kind of frame the discussion around what do we need for the new normal, and what can we do to uplift and really squash out things like racism, things like class, and we really have this opportunity, but if we don't take advantage of it, we don't address it. And I think we've seen that out in the streets. Thousands of people have been marching, and it's not about George Floyd, but it's the symbol that has caused, where we've invested so much in downstream approaches to our community, and we haven't invested in open parks and other spaces. So looking forward to the discussion, and thank you for the previous speakers.
Thank you so much, Cesar.
Really highlighted that stuff. Yeah, thank you.
We got to go upstream. Great. So we have time for just a question or two. Susan?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So the first question is for Landea Jose. How can stakeholders not on the governor's task force follow the work of the task force? And how can stakeholders submit recommendations and or provide comments on recommendations?
Thank you for the question. We have been putting out kind of press releases and information about the actions of the task force periodically through the governor's press office. So that's been the primary way at this point. There are 100 different members of the task force from across the state. And so through that, through engagement with any number of those stakeholders who represent business and industry, they represent labor and nonprofit organizations, people are welcome to submit task force recommendations. You can also just contact me directly, and we can figure out what makes sense. We're very mindful of thinking about the work of the task force as being how do we really jumpstart our economy, and what can we do in the near and immediate term to really make sure people are employed in high growth, high wage, high quality jobs. So that's really our focus, and we want to make sure that the kind of work that we're doing is not intended to circumvent a legislative process, which is a part of our democratic processes. So we have had a lot of incoming from people who kind of think of this as being a vehicle to put things forward. This is not necessarily that vehicle. We're really trying to figure out what do we need to do in the immediate term to really get our economy going and do so in a way that's equitable.
Great, thanks, Lande. Maybe one more question, Susan?
Sure. Second question is, where do equitable training programs and the building of pipelines to careers for those who have barriers to employment fit within the overall strategy for economic recovery?
Great.
I'm happy to pop in on that one. I
Sure.
was looking for a cue, but
Here's your cue, Tara.
I think that chambers are good, small business is good. I think that this is an area where we really need to focus time, effort, and energy. I think that one of the ways that we can bring down student debt is to focus on trades. I mean, look, you can take a young kid of color that is great in math, and most of the time they're recruited for a university that go through the university system, end up with tons of debt They could have gone through a trades program that needs really great math skills as well, come out with a very high paying job, certainly livable wage during the journeyman period, and then six-figure incomes above that. I think that we need to start to look at other options, not downplaying. I have been blessed with a college education and advanced degrees, not downplaying it in any way, but I think that we have to return to a place where we were many years ago, where we looked at all options for all students. And so I think that we have to really beef up our career technical education. I think that we need to look at nonprofits to help support in that training effort. We do far more in terms of training, I think, young professionals than we are oftentimes given credit for. And I think that that is an area that we really, really need to focus on in order to get more into higher paying jobs, which is one of the areas where I know our Central Valley region is struggling. We need some 75,000 new jobs created, and we're only able to do that to the extent that we are able to build up our small and medium-sized businesses to support those efforts.
Great. Cesar, I want to give you a minute to bring us home on this panel, but I also want to congratulate Tara, you and the other members of the executive committee of the Fresno Drive for the $15 million grant you just received from the James Irvine Foundation to carry forward your work of inclusion and race equity in your city. So we were so honored to act as a platform for you folks last year at the Economic Summit, and so excited that is moving forward. But Cesar, you want to bring us home on this, and then we'll move on to the next panel in about a minute.
Yeah, and I kind of want to refer back to the question that was put out there, and how can we kind of look at this new economy? You know, I'm from labor. I support people going into the trades, but in so many cases that's such a micro kind of issue, and I think it's going to help individuals out. And I think for Monterey County, our #1 industry is agriculture. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Hospitality is the second, and for agriculture, those are considered essential workers. They haven't really slowed down since COVID-19, but we're also seeing issues around housing, issues around childcare, and issues around public safety that needs to be addressed for us to really look at the way we do economies in our regions, and how we have to make sure that the jobs that we bring forward might help at the macro level. You know, agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar industry for us, but issues of immigration are important. You know, Monterey County per capita has the highest percentage of undocumented individuals more than other counties. So I would make an argument that we're a border community, and the federal government has addressed those issues. The issues around safety for farm workers, the industry has come up with recommendations, but not mandates. And so as we kind of look at this opportunity for the new normal, I think we need to look at uplifting some of those essential workers, and, you know, making sure that what Cesar Chavez said, a job of a farm worker is a profession. And if it's a profession, you need to give them professional wages and professional benefits. And if you do that, you're going to raise the economy for the region, not just for the farm owners.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cesar. Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you so much, Lande. We've really been depending on these essential workers. We've been taking for granted that we keep having food in our grocery stores during this really challenging time, and people are putting themselves at even greater risk without the commensurate support that they deserve. Thank you so much, Lande and Tara, for elevating the importance of Black lives and equity in all this, and we really, really appreciate your kicking off our event today. All right, so let's move on to the next of the bottom lines. We have a fantastic panel this morning. We have Heidi Hill Drum, the CEO of the Tahoe Prosperity Center, and the incoming co-chair of the California Stewardship Network. We have Amanda Hansen, who is the Deputy Secretary for Climate and Energy at the California Natural Resources Agency, and Glenda Humiston from UCANR and the longtime leader of the Working Landscapes Natural Resources work at the California Economic Summit. So Heidi, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Micah, for introducing me. I'm thrilled to be following in Bruce's footsteps as co-chair and working with Oscar this next year with the California Forward and California Stewardship Network teams. Thank you again, everyone, for putting this together and all the hard work that went in behind the scenes. So I'm going to just quickly set the stage for Sustainable Regions Up Recovery. And hello from beautiful Lake Tahoe, as you can see behind me. Not really at the lake right now. There's actually quite too many people at the beach today. So, but we had a chance in the last recession to make a difference in our regional economy, and we missed out on that opportunity. So we really want to make sure, I think Bruce said it best first, to create the economy that we want, we really have to look at all these opportunities and work together. To do that successfully, we have to do that regionally. We cannot do it with a one-size-fits-none approach, and we've done that in the past. So just to set the stage really quick, in Lake Tahoe, in the last recession, we were dependent on tourism. We're still a tourism-driven economy, but it was 42% of our economy. We're now at more than 62% dependent on tourism. And the problem with that has already been highlighted by Lande and Tara very well, which is low-wage seasonal workers. We don't have high-wage jobs. We don't have year-round jobs with health benefits. And so our economy and our community and our residents suffer up here in Lake Tahoe. So in order to have equity and a sustainable economy that benefits everyone, and you know, to make sure that we're thinking of all of the residents, so that families are not living in old motel rooms that were built in 1950, we have the opportunity to build new housing on state lands and do that in a green and sustainable way. We have an opportunity to meet the 100% renewable goal that was recently set by the city of South Lake Tahoe, and do solar installation and electric vehicle charging stations, and train those workers through our wonderful community colleges, Lake Tahoe Community College and the advanced program, and train our workers for those high wage jobs. I believe Cesar said it a minute ago as well. We're at a crossroads. Let's not miss this opportunity, even though the recession is no fun to be in for many of us, and it's really been the biggest struggle for those low-income seasonal workers in Tahoe. We can look at it as an opportunity and to take advantage of these training programs, the workforce development, and bring in the environment as well as the economy and the community in line. And that is truly the goal of the California Stewardship Network, the Tahoe Prosperity Center, and certainly California Forward. So we really look forward to working with our team and our state in making that happen for our residents.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi. And we are so thrilled to have you coming in as the new co-chair of the California Stewardship Network. Thanks for kicking us off today. Amanda, what's the view from the California Natural Resources Agency on ensuring sustainable Regions Up recovery?
Hi, everyone. Amanda Hansen here. Very nice to join all of you. I'd like to start by just thanking the previous panel. It was really thought-provoking and critical discussion, and also to just kind of flag two things I'd like to build on. The first is, you know, Cesar mentioned this is an opportunity not to make the same mistakes. This is an opportunity to do better and be better. And I think that when it comes to building a sustainable recovery, that truly applies. And then Heidi, your one size fits none. I'm going to totally steal that. That's amazing. And it's funny, but it's also really important to be thinking about as we think about, you know, the role of the state and of regions and of local entities, all of our roles and responsibilities in recovering from this pandemic. I'm going to be really brief and just kind of touch on 3 points, and many of the speakers before me have already flagged, so I will be short. The first is just that as we think about what a sustainable recovery looks like, I think just fundamentally we need to make smart investments. So as we invest in our economy, we can also invest in our environment. So let's make those investments to reduce the likelihood of future threats by driving on our clean energy and carbon neutral economy future. Let's reduce the impact of known threats by investing in community, regional resilience. Second point I want to make is, I think, Londe already hit on this very clearly in her remarks, but it's really critical that we prioritize vulnerable communities. Environmental issue, the nexus between environmental issues and equity issues is very real, and we're aware of that. And again, this is an opportunity to do better and be better. And then the third flag I would raise on a sustainable recovery, and a way to think about it, is to really make an effort to align with and leverage one another's efforts. This is literally, we cannot go this alone. That's the whole sort of impetus around the value of regional collaboration. And so federal, state, regional, local, private, to the extent that we can really engage all actors in all sectors and build out integrated approaches, I think we have a much better chance at actually being better and doing better and building a sustainable recovery.
Awesome.
And comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Glenda, how do we ensure a sustainable Regions Up recovery?
Well, that is the $64 million question, isn't it? Or in our case, a $4 trillion question for the state of California. I guess I'm going to build upon what the previous speaker said as well, and especially Amanda. I loved her final comments as well as everyone else's. I'd like to offer up 3 key points. It's been my pleasure to work throughout this state in literally every county for almost 30 years now. And one of the things I have learned is that California has some of the brightest, most innovative people anywhere on the planet. You cannot go to a single region or county or even community and not find somebody that has come up with a solution to a challenge. The problem is, all too often, those wonderful solutions never get beyond that community or that region. We're not good at leveraging the knowledge we all have and our resources. And just to throw out a few, and this is dangerous because every time you throw out a few, you insult the folks you didn't name. But we've already heard about Fresno Drive. We've heard some other good examples. I mean, Valley Vision has done some amazing work for a decade now on regional food systems. Go up north to the Humboldt County Fairgrounds, where they've used their fairgrounds to be an incubator for almost 20 businesses. They're supporting entrepreneurs. It's amazing. Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, their good food procurement program ought to be an international model. It is such a fantastic thing. RCRC, the Rural County Representatives of California, announced at the summit that they've built an entire supply chain from forest biomass through manufacturing, through distribution, into markets they created in Asia. We need to do much more of that. The Riverside Unified School District is serving as an aggregation hub to facilitate farmer direct-to-school lunch programs, and now it's expanded into others. And you could go on and on and on. Last but not least, SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, with their development of ROCS, the Rural Urban Connection Strategy, which leads me to my second point. We've got to quit reinventing the wheel. Every region, every community wants to start from scratch, reinvent the wheel, not take advantage of the lessons and solutions that have already been developed. And we waste many millions of dollars on reinventing the wheel and duplicating. And my last point, which I think is critical and one that I've been a champion of for long, as have many people, we need to invest our money in California. We're one of the richest states in the nation, And most of our wealth has been sucked out of our state for people on Wall Street to play with. That's ridiculous. Yeah, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, they get a little bit of it back. But 80% of the state has all of their wealth, their retirement accounts, their savings, their investments sucked out of the state. It's not available to their local communities. We got to turn that around too.
All right. Thank you so much, Glenda. You're mentioning Valley Vision reminds me that they have a new CEO, Evan Schmidt. Congratulations so much, taking over for Bill Mueller and then Meg Arnold in the interim. And Evan was in our first class of Steward Fellows for the California Stewardship Network. So we'll be out in the street recruiting for our third class of Steward Fellows soon. And I don't know if we can guarantee a CEO job within the couple of years of being in that fellowship program, but it definitely seems to be a rocket booster for your career as a steward leader. And Evan will be speaking in one of the breakout sessions on the work that Valley Vision has been doing. Susan, questions for the panel? And if there aren't, then I have one that I could tee up.
We had one that came in through the chat window, Micah.
Great.
This is from Steve Pontel. In order to get the economy moving, there are numerous regulations and mitigations that prevent investment. Which rules should be changed and how do we get it done?
Ooh, an easy question. Just kidding. Well, I'm going to give each of the panelists about a minute or so to answer that, to wrap up this piece of the plenary. Who wants to?
I'll pipe in first and just say that I think any regulatory approach that slows down good work should be evaluated. And in the case of the Natural Resources Agency, we've really been driving on a concern around how long it takes to do really good landscape restoration work in California, and thinking about ways that we can cut the green tape so that we are able to incentivize and fast track the really critical and good work that needs to be done. So I would just highlight that as an approach for looking across all investments around or regulatory requirements on what might usefully be streamlined.
Great, thanks, Amanda.
And this is Heidi with the Tahoe Prosperity Center. I see a question just came through for Glenda, so I'm going to let her answer that next question. So I'll jump in with our big thing is we have to streamline housing development. It is critical for our communities. It's critical to get families out of motel rooms. And it is, again, it can be a green and sustainable job for our communities because the housing that we're building can be innovative and creative with tiny homes and modular. And again, the type of innovation that we do here in California can be done on our housing. We have state lands available to make that happen, but our local governments, our county governments, and our state governments really need to help with the streamlining to make it happen fast. So that's my 2 cents.
And then Glenda, people want to know, how do we get that money back from Wall Street?
There's not enough time to completely answer that question here, but the good news is a lot of smart people have been working on that. We have models, we've had discussions, and I think you're seeing more and more interest in doing that. We just got to get folks identifying that as a key thing. And it could be as simple as just changing up how large investment portfolios like CalPERS and CalSTRS and others start investing. We're actually trying to do that at the University of California with our UC Ventures, which is all targeted at entrepreneurial and startups from California that we're going to invest in. Others could be doing the same thing, but mostly we've got to create regional financial infrastructure to make it work. Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Glenda. And just want to call out your leadership also of our capital markets work over many years with Greg Wendt, work that continues in this vein, and all of the work that's been being done by the infrastructure finance folks, Matt Horton, Mark Pisano, and others through the California Economic Summit. And sometimes we get a little wonky, right? Enhanced infrastructure financing districts doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue. However, the work of that group was lifted up by the Los Angeles Times just a couple of weeks ago as a mechanism for redressing structural racism through the ability to reinvest. We say disinvest in communities. Well, that's hopefully the past. We need to be able to direct those infrastructure investment dollars to our disinvested communities, to our communities of color, to our Black communities, our Indigenous communities. And that is the kind of work that we do and that you and others have led through the Economic Summit. So thank you so much for that work. And I realize that, they kind of talk about moving into the lightning round of a panel, and this has been sort of a lightning set of panels. But we've also found that this is really how it works best in the Zoom format, and then the workshops that folks will be moving into will be a lot more relaxed, and there'll be a lot more time for interaction and Q&A. So I want to figuratively bring up our third panel, so David. And here we're going to be focusing on the bottom line in the triple bottom line, and sort of the economic imperatives, although they're all tied together in a rapid regions up recovery. And we are absolutely thrilled to have with us Maria Salinas, the CEO of the LA Chamber of Commerce, and a member of the Governor's Economic Advisory Council, Julian Parra, who is from Bank of America and the chair of the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, longtime California Stewardship member Lori Saba, bringing him in for this. So thank you so much for making time. And then Chris Dombrowski, who, as many of you know, has succeeded our pal Lenny Mendonça as the head of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So I will have you kick things off, if that is okay, Chris.
Yeah, it's great. I just can't start my video, so apologies for that. It says the host has blocked it. But let me just start. Obviously, given the context of where we're talking today, which is clear to all of you, is that, simultaneously we're dealing with a health crisis and an economic crisis at the same time. So when we start talking about a rapid recovery, I got to say, so much of our focus is still on this immediacy of the crisis and what we can do to enable our economy to start to reopen safely. So we just have to acknowledge that a recovery has to be founded on this public health. And so what you saw is that there's a big focus from the governor yesterday at his press conference talking about the rising case numbers that we're having. And just that impetus that our individual actions are going to affect our whole society going forward. And it's going to affect not only the short term, but the long term on this recovery. Talking about the importance of wearing face coverings. And we saw that with his announcement and his PSA with all of California's past governors, with the Republicans and Democrats both joining together in this social media campaign to just do it, wear the mask, and help do your individual part to buy down the risk. We've been working with our counterparts over at Public Health and DIR, Cal OSHA, as it's more frequently referred to issue industry guidance. And it's just so important and imperative on all of us that we make sure that our businesses are able to implement this guidance, make these modifications and adaptations to their workplaces that are going to help buy down that risk of spreading the virus, and keeping both the employees and our customers safe as we start to reopen. Obviously, we understand, the needs of small businesses and those that in the different areas that are depending on this tourism right now in the reopening process, as well as those who must travel for their work. And so the disparities among these communities, they obviously existed much longer than just this pandemic, and they persist through this crisis. So I think, as other panelists has noted, that we're going to have to take a real look at this and try to see what we can do to start to try and address these issues as we work towards recovery. It just brings me to my next point, which is that recovery obviously has to be predicated upon equity. We saw this addressed a little bit in the governor's task force. They issued an open letter last Monday calling out the effects of structural racism across society and urging businesses and civic leaders to take a stand against that injustice. So some of the highlights that Lande alluded to in that letter. And so obviously, we're looking for partnership. We're looking for to try and help those different regions and communities address and implement this guidance, and making sure that we can reopen safely, and again, buy down this risk as we go through the months ahead and work towards recovery.
Great, thanks, Chris. And I don't know why we couldn't see you. Maybe you can start your video now. I'm being told on the back end. Hey, there he is. It is no evaluation of the importance of our partnership with COVID. So thank you so much for that. And I mean, and just calling to the attention that, we're really dealing with a triple bottom line crisis right now. And so we need to bring, awareness of the pandemic, as well as the race equity to bear as we figure out how to recover. So thank you so much for those remarks, Chris. And I'll turn it over to you, Julian.
Great, thanks, Micah. Great to be here today. I appreciate the invitation. So with us, we've kind of learned from the history lesson of how we rebounded from the last recession, which wasn't that long ago. Our innovation economy made us more prosperous, perhaps in other regions, but it also widened those economic disparities in ways that now threaten our long-term competitiveness and resiliency. So with the economic impact of COVID-19 disproportionately affecting lower-income San Diegans and racial inequities bubbling here to the surface, stakes couldn't be higher that we get this recovery right. And I think the key stat that we think about is San Diego's economy more than doubled over the last 2 decades, but median household income growth only grew at half that rate. So the right recovery is putting systems in place that ensure that we rebuild our economy in a thoughtful way so that all San Diegans can benefit from the region's future growth. And then the right recovery for us is rooted in the inclusive growth work that we started a couple of years ago under my predecessor. And it focuses on ensuring we double down on the building blocks that make for a strong economy in our region. And so for us, it's around skilled talent, it's around economically stabilizing jobs, and it's around thriving households. And there's a lot of work to be done there as well. But those are the keys for our economy. And I guess at the end of the day, for us, it's going to be around focusing those efforts that benefit all San Diegans in this unique moment in time, as others have alluded to on the panel. So it's not only that small businesses recover, but they need to thrive. It means that everyone, no matter the zip code they were born in, has access to opportunities and the education that enables them. And it means designing a region where owning a car is not a requirement to access opportunities. It means elevating Black and brown voices and weaving them into the regional economy and making them part of the economy. So that is our focus from a San Diego perspective.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for weaving it together. I mean, it's a little bit of an artificial construct to have these different panels. And so I'm just really appreciative how all the members of all the different panels are weaving together, that these aren't individual silos, but these are really imperatives that we need to address all at the same time. So Maria, how do we get a Rapid Regions Up recovery going here?
Rapid Regions Up. I love that title. I think my comments are going to be very similar to what you've already heard. I think in Los Angeles for the chamber, clearly the experiencing the health crisis, experiencing the economic crisis, and what it has shed light on. I view that as something that our organization is really taking a proactive view on what does recovery look like with an equitable lens. Sitting on the governor's task force and being one of the signers to the letter that Chris made reference to, those principles that are adopted by the state very much align with the strategic plan that we have put in place last year. When we think about the investments that need to be made to ensure that recovery is equitable, that means investing in those communities that we might not have looked at before. That means investing in communities that were marginalized, investing in businesses that didn't have access to relief efforts, that whether it was coming from the federal or any other level. It's taking a different look, a different view into what relief could look like and what recovery needs to look like. So I can tell you that at the LA Chamber, there's a real intentional focus on where do we as an organization need to be to ensure that there's participation in this economy from all members of our community. It's a tall order, but I think it's one that is needed. in order to address some of the structural racism that we all talk about and that we hear about. I think it's an imperative for us to ensure that we move beyond this. And I know it was said, if not on this panel, on the previous panel, we can't recover and build what we had before. What we had before wasn't working. So we have to build it new. We have to reimagine it, rethink it so that it's a different structure that we can all operate in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maria. Yeah, I'm co-facilitating the Oakland Economic Recovery Council, and I'm lobbying for us to call it the Oakland Economic Renewal Council, right? Just because to make that point that we need to really have an economic renewal, which everybody on this call really understands, but not everybody understood how the economic recovery over the course of the past 10 years really didn't benefit everybody. They sort of assumed that it would be more like the post-war period, but it just was not. All right, so Susan, questions for these panelists?
Sure, we have one from Veronica Garibay, which is for Chris, but it might be one that everybody might like to have a chance to weigh in on as well. In terms of addressing health and economic crisis, how is the administration specifically addressing racial disparities in COVID positive cases and deaths? For Chris, but maybe more broadly for the other panelists, just how should the administration be addressing these disparities?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great concerns that obviously we have when looking at the data, particularly around this crisis. And it is something that our public health folks are working very diligently on, is trying to assess what is the actual driver of this issue. I think you've seen Secretary Galley speak about this in many of the governor's press conferences, talking about, you know, the differences and between the data, showing how Latinx and our Black communities are more affected by the COVID crisis. And so I think that we're still trying to understand exactly what's driving that. Is that access to health care? Is that folks are not getting the care they need soon enough? And so again, it's a huge focus of ours trying to unpack that and the specifics around it. I think also when it comes to these inequities, you know, we see this, and I do want to talk just a little bit about the small businesses. It's the same thing with the small businesses. You saw programs that were set up for them through the federal government that maybe our communities weren't able to access. And so we've started to stand up programs through the iBank to beef up our small business loan guarantee program to have access to capital for those businesses that wouldn't necessarily have it through those federal programs. And so again, you see that as part of the budget deal that is hopefully going through this week as well. So just a few things there.
Yeah, and I think if I could chime in, I mean, because this is something that we look at in Los Angeles as well. And I think it's, you know, being some of those essential jobs that might be low wage jobs that give, you know, are exposing this community into, you know, greater risk. That is something that has been shared with us. Overcrowding in housing is another element that has been shared with us. And like Chris mentioned, the access to healthcare. I think those are things that we have seen in some of the data that even USC and UCLA together have been working on some studies that I know they'll be issuing fairly soon. But I think it's having those kind of data points and really understanding it that then imparts on us the responsibility to address that, to figure out how do we recover, knowing that there are members in our community that are suffering in that manner. So I think it is, you know, definitely something that we should all take a very close look and make sure we're understanding those sources of those.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. And before I hand it over to you, Julian, I wanted to just call out a couple of things. One, the California Economic Summit has stood up a work group with the sort of advice of your colleague, Isabel Guzman from the Office of the Small Business Advocate, Chris, on capital access for minority small businesses, explicitly putting race equity into the agenda in addition to thinking about how it influences the rest of the agenda. We're also working on equity in home ownership and understanding that there's a nexus between, you know, how some of our environmental policies play out and the ways in which Latinx, Black, Indigenous communities, if they have access to build wealth in the way that most middle-class families have built wealth, which is through home ownership. We need to be building housing in all of our communities, but we need to still build housing in urban areas. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Maria. The problem is not density, the problem is overcrowding. We be helping with the COVID crisis if we build more housing for people in urban areas as well. So that I really appreciate you saying that, Maria, and I just wanted to put an exclamation point on.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people are maybe drawing the wrong conclusions about what this means for building in urban areas.
So Mike, I really just wanted to add on to what Chris and Maria said. Certainly we see the disproportionate impact of the outbreak among our Black and brown communities, and it's exacerbated those inequities. For us, around half of Hispanics report someone in the household has taken a pay cut or lost a job because of the outbreak, and that's compared to only about 33% of all US adults. So there's been a disproportionate impact, and when I think of what we're doing around skilled talent, economically stabilizing jobs and thriving households, there is an offset to these things to make folks part of this economy so that we can benefit for a broader San Diego region. So there's no question it's been a disproportionate impact along the way.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the three of you. And again, like we're seeing these connections here, right? We can't have a rapid economic recovery on the backs of our communities of color. A lot of people really don't understand. This is like we have a racialized economy. We have in a lot of ways, a racialized impact of the virus. And so a lot of people who operate in different social economic circles don't understand the impact that this virus is still having on a tremendous number of communities throughout the state. So I really appreciate you raising those equity concerns. I really appreciate your being with us here today. And now we're going to move into our final panel. We put together all kinds of different things at the California Economic Summit, and you know, certainly people were excited about Fresno Drive and about some of the policy work, but the thing that they were the most excited about consistently was the panel that we had, Elevating Youth Voices, where we kicked off our second day. And so just wanted to let folks know that this isn't just a situation where we want to create a platform for the next generation of leaders. We want to make sure that they are influencing our work. California Forward, we're going forward. We need to work with the people that are going to be there and be the leaders in that next time. So we have stood up a Youth Advisory Council. You'll be hearing from a couple of the members of that Youth Advisory Council. And we're going to be integrating them increasingly into the decision-making aspects of our work, not just advising us, but being at the table with us as we craft the solutions for California's future. So wanted to turn it over to Michael Weinberg to share a few remarks on his perspective on what he's heard today and how to advance the triple bottom line going forward.
Well, thank you, Micah, for the introduction and for including young voices in the policy discussions as stakeholders and future practitioners of everything that's going on, actually. Hello, as introduced, my name is Micah Weinberg, and I'm a member of the California Forward Youth Advisory Council. A little bit about me before I get into a couple points. I'm an African immigrant and I grew up in the Inland Empire. I'm an intern now with the Public Policy Institute of California. I do not speak on behalf of the organization, and on my way for a master's in public policy at UC Berkeley in the fall. A little over a month ago, I graduated from San Diego State, where I was a student leader and finished my term as president of the Cal State Student Association, which represents 500,000 students for the California State University. This also means that I was a system-wide student leader when COVID-19 really started to affect students and young people broadly. As you all know at this point, the pandemic exacerbated the many inequities that exist within California, but something I want us to all start to think about is how to address these issues that existed and are becoming more heightened and address them in a way that reflects the advanced age that we live in. And create a system that allows for future generations like myself and those who come after people my age to build on and improve as we progress as a society. We heard from so many great panelists today, and I don't know how to follow any of that up, but I want to point out Glenda from UCANR mentioned that we're not learning from the lessons and solutions that others have created, even though we have fully the modality to be able to do so. We're in the digital age. and some of us grew up in the digital age. I was watching YouTube, I was running Google searches, I had an email in elementary school. I had a Facebook in middle school. I was on all social media modalities in high school. And from an early age, really felt like we can literally put out information to millions of people to the world and connect to them in a matter of seconds. But what I've noticed is that we're not all using the internet in a way and technological advancement to its fullest potential to address equity in our society. Some people are and some people aren't, and I think that's really creating some disparities. For example, I can unlock my phone with my face or a fingerprint. We can make purchases by tapping our phones. I could turn off my lights, play music with my voice. But just quick example, we still have to physically go in to vote during a weekday, during work hours, which I know serves as a barrier for many from being able to really engage with government of the local area. And civic engagement is really important for political advocacy. But especially now as COVID-19 has changed our modality of life, we could use this opportunity to look into the growing use of technology to address issues in a new way as a conduit to elevating unheard voices, distributing important information, reinvesting in our communities, and lead to some of the largest economic growth to reinstill a better future, while also engaging young people like myself in the conversation about what the future should look like. Just another quick example, in order to be a student now, it requires an effective computer and good Wi-Fi and technological literacy. I've been in classes where students cut out in the middle of discussions, where professors take a few minutes to unmute themselves, and other technological, mishaps, because we're not all at the same level, but somehow are expected to be. Students are writing papers on their phones, and there are so many other things that are happening because of technology. But this is not a new issue, and people are acting like this is a new issue. Most of the issues that we're discussing right now are not new, but now have become critical, and they're heightened. And we should deliberately and consciously build a system that's based on social equity, economic justice, environmental sustainability, and try to create a bridge to the future with a new normal, instead of reverting back to a society that had disinvested communities and didn't use some of the resources that we currently have today to the greatest potential. We have a choice whether this is a moment in time or a turning point to finally being able to address some of the issues in our communities and across the state. I have a lot more thoughts, but I know we're going very quickly on time. So thank you again, Micah, for including us on this panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And, as we've discussed, the California Forward through the Economic Summit has been working on broadband access, bridging the digital divide for many years. The governor announced the Broadband for All initiative at the California Economic Summit last year. And we've been working very hard under the leadership of people like Sunny Wright McPeak to really deliver that, because teleeducation is not equitable. And that's really been elevated by this particular moment. And I've seen some in the chats of people wanting to hire Michael, but Michael, we would like dibs if we could before you, talk to all the folks participating in this event. But let me turn it over to Carla Martinez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Martinez. I am entering 5th year at UC Davis. I am studying community and regional development. And before my work really, started here at the university level and in other organizations that I've been part of, I was a youth journalist. I was a community storyteller here in the Eastern Coachella Valley, where I'm from and where I'm currently at. And so, having this conversation about how do we move forward together, I really want to bring flesh into the conversation. We've been talking about structures, we've been talking about the economy, and we've been, really throwing around a lot of language that isn't always the most accessible to the individuals who are actually facing the impacts of COVID-19. And so when I think about bringing flesh to the conversation, I think about thinking of the intersectionality of identities of the people who live in the communities that we work in, and thinking about how as individuals who work in organizations, we are so more resources. The experts are the community members. The experts are the people on the ground who interact with these systems. And we need to be talking to them. We need to be investigating how they are navigating the education system now that it went online. We need to actually have conversations and provide a space where there's childcare and access to food and that language accessibility, right? That we create a space where individuals actually want to come in and tell us their stories and give us their feedback so that we can actually, get an idea of what changes we need to make. When I was a youth reporter, a lot of the time, we talked about the Salton Sea, the dying Salton Sea here in the Eastern Coachella Valley, which is a major environmental justice issue that is also racially based. A lot of the people who live around the Salton Sea are undocumented farm workers, and they make up a big composition of the workforce here. And so it's really important to bridge the stakeholders who are dedicated to resolving the issue of the Salton Sea. Now with COVID-19, folks already had breathing diseases like asthma, and with COVID-19 it was just exacerbated to the highest potential. And having conversated with folks who live in the area, or having even conversated with family members who are now learning to teach their kids from home, the way that community members are engaging with these difficulties are not being spoken to. Who's actually talking to these individuals, and who's making sure that their voices are not just being heard, but that they can actually be giving testimony and be part of the decision-making process, right? I think that another thing that we need to be asking ourselves is that, and I really enjoyed how they highlighted that there is no standard that we can all, as the state of California, follow for how to address the vast amount of racial, economic, and social issues that have been highlighted because of COVID, but we do have something really special, and it's learning from one another, and really talking to folks who you really wouldn't invite to the table, but who have really amazing ideas. And I think that it's time to really ask ourselves, like the complex question about who are the disposable people, and how are we treating this world as a disposable world? When we're talking about environmental justice, we're not just talking about ensuring that everybody can, use solar and use reusable bags, but we're also talking about landfills and where those landfills are put, right? So just really talking to your local community members will really inform you way more than hiring like a firm who can cost your organization billions of dollars.
Right.
Really talk to your people, engage with your youth. I would not be in the position that I am at a UC if it wasn't for the organizations that I worked with since the beginning of my high school year. If it wasn't for the local planner who works at the Riverside County, who guided me and who saw the potential in me, but also the people that we were working with. Like, how do you engage young people in community planning, right? In the communities that they were raised in and that they're very dedicated to changing. Talk to your youth, and your youth who are also going off to college, right? Like, I have so many ideas for my community, and I share them, but there's a lot of youth who go off to college and don't want to come back. How do you reach out to those youth and make sure that they become part of the planning committees that exist in your community? So I think that the most important part that I want to highlight is bringing flesh into the conversation. Yes, we're talking about the economy, we're talking about structures, but really let's get down to talking to the actual people in your communities and building a space for them to be part of those conversations, and also engaging with youth and the youth organizations that exist within your communities so that they can be part of the planning process and the conversation for fixing their communities after COVID. So
yeah, thank you so much, Carla. For us, Regions Up means people up, and we're so grateful to have your voice, Michael's voice, and we're doing everything that we can to support the voices of people in local communities determining their own solutions and having, as Cesar said, a bubble up economy rather than a trickle down economy. So thank you so much for being here with us today and for serving on our Youth Advisory Council and for making sure that we're remaining accountable to that promise, that it isn't just something that we say, but something that we do increasingly. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Kate Gordon. one of the leads of Regions Rise Together, to tell us a little bit more about how this work is moving forward, including through the work of the statewide economic recovery task force. Kate.
Thanks, Micah. And I can't believe you're making me follow Carla and Michael, who are both amazing and far more interesting to listen to than a bureaucrat from Sacramento. But I will do my best to live up to the example that they just said. And one thing I did want to say is that in the Office of Planning and Research, which I run, one of the things that we do is guidance for local and regional governments on their general plans. And we are this Friday posting our environmental justice guidance, finally, after many years of very, very deep stakeholder engagement. And Carla will be happy to know that one of the primary things that we recommend in that is engagement of youth and community members from the very beginning of the planning process. It's one of the most important pieces, I think, of the puzzle, and thank you for highlighting it. I'll talk to just a couple minutes. I want to give a little bit of time for questions, and I think I did have slides, but it's fine if we can't put them up.
I think we can. Here we go.
There they are. I'll go really fast. I only have 5 slides. Sorry, they're text heavy. So Regions Rise Together was an initiative that we started last year that was really based on the governor's very deep commitment to California for all, meaning really California for all, meaning looking not just at our coastal cities that tend to get a lot of the philanthropic and private investment, but really looking at the entire state and particularly inland counties of the state. And I just want to give a minute of a shout out to Lenny Mendoza, formerly the head of GoBiz, who really was one of the visionaries behind this project and a partner to me, and really just an amazing co-leader and fearless kind of warrior on these issues. So Regions Rise really, we sort of took 3 separate approaches in how to kind of change this idea of regions up planning and thinking into something real. And there's sort of 3 different pieces of that. One is kind of changing the mental map of California so that it includes all of California instead of just LA and San Francisco, which often is the mental map that people have. And that's been as much of an internal education, frankly, as an external one within the administration. The next was really to take a regions up approach, as we keep talking about, and listen to the regions themselves about, what works where, what are the different conditions on the ground, what's the regional diversity, what are the different approaches that folks are taking. And the third was really the state's role in helping provide that interconnective tissue so regions can collaborate with each other, and that work we do at the state can really go across regions. I'd give as examples of that tissue, our rail network, including high-speed rail, our UC, CSU, and community college network, our water networks, our road networks. These are all interconnective tissue for the state as a whole that the state really has a unique role in providing in collaboration with our regions. Throughout Regions Rise, we took an approach that we call high road, which is essentially saying you can't just do economic development. You really have to take a high road economic approach, which focuses on not just jobs, but job quality, not just growth, but sustainable and resilient growth, and not just sustainable resilient growth, but inclusive and equitable growth. So those were all core principles to Regions Rise. And you can go to the next slide. In the Regions Up work that we've done, I know everybody keeps talking about Fresno Drive, and to Glenda's point, it isn't the only example. It's a great example. There's a lot of examples around the state, but Fresno Drive was, of course, an initiative started far earlier than Regions Rise Together. We've been really honored to be able to provide some amount of support to Fresno Drive through the budget, although, of course, not as much as we had hoped. I mean, this is the current story at the state level. Going from a $20 billion surplus to a $55 billion deficit is a big blow to all of us, but we were able to provide or preserve some of the support to Fresno Drive. The state's also been able to support through some of our labor and workforce development funding to support a project BK3, which is Bakersfield and Kern County project, looking at an economic plan and an economic study to think about how to diversify the economy of Kern County so it's not as heavily dependent on just a couple of industries. And that work has been in collaboration, really run through the Community Foundation, and we're just honestly there to be supportive, and includes a very diverse group of stakeholders from the very beginning. We're doing a number of consulting with, and some of this is through California Forward, so thank you to you guys again, with a number of regional economic development groups around the state on different approaches and how to think through sort of getting from economic analysis to the real work of how do you bring in stakeholders, how do you think through, you know, job growth, workforce training, all those different pieces that together make up a sustainable economic development strategy. And within the state itself, we're working actually in a number of areas where we're bringing agencies together to align state policies around key issues. One of them is freight and logistics, which is an area that is growing and growing even faster due to COVID actually. And one of them is just regional planning more generally. And in that conversation, we're talking about the sustainable community strategies, the relationships to the general plans. How do we think about helping to build out a network and support a network of regional planning around the state? So we're doing a lot of work within the state. You can go to the next slide. You've heard a lot about the task force. The task force is really important because it's a place where a number of folks have been able to engage with the governor, and this is Ann O'Leary and Tom Steyer and the governor here. Ann and Tom are co-leads of the task force, really engage on these questions of how do we think about a recovery. And I agree about the word recovery. I would say, we in my office always say we don't want to bounce back, we want to bounce forward. I think people have been saying some variation of that on this call.
Love it.
The task force is really an opportunity to think through in these different subcommittees, how are we actually thinking about what a reimagined California looks like coming out of this crisis? And that is everything from immediate recovery to much longer term questions around the interaction of our economic recovery with climate, with innovation, and underlying all of it, as Lande said earlier, is a set of equity principles. And you can go to the next slide, Micah, or whoever's controlling the slides. I am really honored to be co-chairing one of the subcommittees, and I'm just showing you this slide because it's kind of a good example of what the committee structure looks like. Each of the subcommittees has a state lead, and then a number of co-chairs from across private sector and academia, and then you'll see a number of folks from all kinds of different parts of the economy on the workforce transition subcommittee, including the venture capital world, the tech world, the manufacturing world, labor, and Janet Yellen thrown in there for a really important broader economic perspective. You can go to the next slide. So, you know, as we as an administration and of course through the task force are thinking about this sort of how do we bounce forward, it really does offer an opportunity to think about many of the things you all have brought up around you know, how do we do that in a way that is safe for workers? How do we do that in a way that is sustainable? How do we build an economy that actually addresses some of the deep fissures that have been highlighted through this current crisis, that doesn't just recreate the inequity, recreate the racial injustice, recreate the what we would call low road economic structures that have been part of our economy for a long time that we've essentially sort of come to accept. But honestly do not make us resilient. If we want to have an economy in California that is resilient, that is inclusive, that will last, we need to think differently. And I think there's a real opportunity to do that across so many areas: transportation, housing, infrastructure. How do we think about our food systems? How do we think about our electricity systems? What role does broadband play in a new world where telework, telemedicine, and teleeducation are so central? How do we think about a workforce that's actually being trained for jobs that are going to exist instead of theoretical jobs that we hope are going to exist? All of these things. And how do we think about the role of our natural and working lands really as part of a resilient system, not as sort of a nice to have, sometimes you go for a hike, but actually protect us from floods, actually protect us from fires, actually help us to keep our economy moving forward and our communities safe. So these are all, you know, things that we're addressing. We're trying to take a really integrated approach that I credit the Regions Rise framework, frankly, and that way of thinking originally from the governor, with kind of taking that approach and thinking through all of these pieces together as we're moving forward. So it's an exciting time. The last thing I'll say is that as we do this in the state, of course, a lot of what we're doing is looking to the federal government for support of many of these initiatives and making these same cases to the federal government on a more effective set of systems that can then drive economic growth, not just in California, but in all the other states that we work with and trade with and partner with across the country and across the world. So thank you so much, Micah, for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Regions Rise, how the administration is continuing to think regionally, to raise up those regional voices, to continue to provide kind of a framework and a set of interconnection tissue for the regions across the state. And we're just really excited to get to work with you and with everyone on the call. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm really thrilled that the administration is carrying forward this regional focus under your leadership during challenging time to carry anything forward. And so it means the world to us, candidly, as folks that are, as Carla said, we need to bring flesh to the conversation. We need to remember that, people are what we need to focus on, and a Regions Up approach is a really great way to do that. So thank you so much to Michael, to Carla, to the rest of the panelists. Thank you to everybody for participating in this. Thank you to the leaders of the California Stewardship Network for putting this together, to the leaders of the California Economic Summit for carrying forward the substantive policy work to address these issues. And look, California Forward is a movement to make California's economy and government work for everyone. And that work continues, and it continues with greater urgency, with a greater focus on race equity, with a greater focus on ensuring that our economy works for everybody, that we're bouncing forward or renewing or bubbling up or whatever it is of the language that we choose, that we're really doing it. And so I appreciate most of your engagement in what we're doing. If you're new to our merry little band of good policy people, please get engaged in the summit. And we're going to be dropping into the chat the links for those of you who haven't already registered for the workshops. These are the list of the workshops that many of you have pre-registered for. So you can go ahead, for those of you who have registered, and click over to those. They're going to be a little bit less lightning, but there'll also be a little bit of back and forth. It isn't quite walking people down the street in Fresno from the convention, from the hotel to the convention center, but it's the virtual version of that. So for those of you who haven't already registered and moved over, I wanted to just let you know about some of the conversations that we'll be having over the course of the next hour and a half. The first being a workshop, if we could go back to workshop A, on making regional planning deliver for equity. So a lot of times regional planning is focused on sort of transportation and land use, and somewhere in there is equity, and maybe there are equity groups advocating for different outcomes, but really working on designing an entire economy around equity. And so have a lot of terrific leaders from across the state talking about how they're doing this in their own communities. Workshop B, we've had some really great regional innovations around providing resilience to businesses through the standing up of different funds to support the businesses in their own communities. And you'll get some guidance on how to do that in your own community. So to Glenda's point about disseminating best practices, this is a place where this is going to happen. Workshop C. So we've done a lot of work in workforce programs, but we need to really think about how do we leverage those workforce programs to deal with the urgency of the moment, and that we're really creating those high road jobs that Kate Gordon and others have talked about. Workshop D, so many workshops. Maximizing the regional impact of federal funding. We've got federal funding flowing to the regions. How do we ensure that this federal funding is actually empowering the things that we want to see in our economy? So it's less a workshop about how to access the federal funds and more about what to do with the federal funds once you access them. And then finally, workshop E, effective cross-sector collaboration. So we've got a lot of leaders from the private sector, the public sector, and elsewhere that are running these regional and local economic recovery task forces. You'll be hearing from them about their best practices. You'll be talking to them about what's going on in your own communities. you know, it's another one of these situations where I wish I could participate in all these workshops simultaneously, but we will be recording all of them if folks want to participate. And we'll stick around to monitor the chat here in the plenary if folks are having technical challenges entering or have any questions for us. But thank you so much all for being here today. And let's keep these regions recovering together. Thank you so much.